All right. Tougies Take, episode 37. I think just in terms of acknowledging the elephant in the room, I think we just get the news out of the way. And I think that's our thoughts are with the Pasternak family, the passing of their son. Obviously very devastating for the hockey community as a whole, especially such a well-liked player as Pasternak,
Yeah, the news broke while I was streaming the other night, and it was one of those things where people are like, "Oh my god, you see the news?" I'm like, because at the time, what do you even say to that? And even now, 2 days later or so since the news broke, and I still don't know what to say. Like it. How do you react to the biggest heartbreak a parent can possibly have? And it's something that I can't sympathize. I don't think either one of us can necessarily sympathize with, not being parents, where it's just, it's like you can, or not sympathize with. I don't know if that was the wrong choice of words, more so empathize, like properly empathize with it.
Yeah. No,
excuse me if that was a poor choice of words there for a second.
No, I mean, sympathize is I think that's also, it's not a terrible word choice. It also makes sense. Like, but yeah, I know what you're trying to say.
We can feel an incredible amount of sorrow for them, but understanding that pain, man, I don't think that's something that you can truly understand unless you go through it, and nobody should have to go through that. So, yeah, my God. And that was kind of one of the things Deej and I wanted to say off the top here, along with something else. We wanted to try to get the bad news out of the way first so that we can, get to the laughs and joking about stuff. Deej, I don't know if you want to cut to the other thing, but I mean, I think...
I don't know. I wanted to add something similar that happened to the Pasternaks, happened to a friend of mine several years ago, and he... It was a long road back, but he dug himself out of it, and he actually ended up writing a couple self-help books for people dealing with loss, and he was able to make some good out of it. And I mean, I can only wish the same for the Pasternak family, because I mean, what else do you do,
Yeah, and I mean, it's pretty much all you can say too, just in terms of... Oh man, just in terms of how it's gone down. Like I said, I mean, people have been like, "Oh, especially as a Bruins fan." It's like, man, it doesn't matter if it was a Bruins player or a Panthers player. It doesn't matter if it's an ECHL player. Like nobody should have to go through this. So, like you said, he does have a platform where if he wanted to, if he wants to be as private as possible about this, and obviously short term he does, but if he wanted to try to turn this into an incredible positive, and I'm sure he will. Yeah, I'm sure eventually he'll find a way. But for now, yeah, just awful.
Yeah. And I guess the other big thing is, I mean, news continues to come out and break about this Blackhawks case. And I mean, it seems to just get worse.
It was one of our viewer questions. It was from Cody, a longtime viewer, supporter of both of ours, really. And he mentioned, do you think Marc Bergevin would get fired after this postseason for being on the 2010 Blackhawks team? And I'll say first and foremost, I get why people have questions like that. I do think it's a bit inappropriate in a way to try to, guess. Is similarly inappropriate to try and sit there and be like, well, who was it? Oh, I can look at the team and it might be this guy. Like, there are some things that you got to try to avoid doing, despite that, I guess, morbid curiosity, which I think is just, for the most part, just kind of a natural human thing where you want to know, like, well, Jesus, what the hell happened? And, but point being, Cody asked this, and I knew that we'd have to talk about it. So I figured, number one, again, whether or not anybody gets fired here, look, who's to say? Katie Strang, who is one hell of a reporter. She asked by Katie Strang about sexual assault allegations against Brad Aldrich from his time with the Blackhawks. Marc Bergevin said, and I quote, "I was not part of any meeting. I was not a part of any decision, and I was not aware of what was going on at the time, and you can go on the record with that." Now, as Deej mentioned, more and more news keeps coming out. And again, we've mentioned him. Shout out to Rick Westhead of TSN. He is a big part of the reason as to why this ball has just refused to stop that momentum, where there were, it feels like there were attempts to try to derail the momentum of this story and certain people turning a blind eye to it. And thankfully, that's not the case, and it is getting the proper amount of momentum and spotlight that it deserves. Like I said, it looked like it wasn't going to there for a bit, but there was an anonymous quote from a former Blackhawks player who said, quote, "Every guy on the team knew about what happened with Brad Aldrich." Dan Carcillo said, "I was on the Flyers playing against the Blackhawks in the 2010 final. We heard whispers of what Aldrich did." A former coach has confirmed that Blackhawks management met to discuss the alleged abuse. So I can't sit here and say Marc Bergevin's a liar, but there are a lot of other people saying that it would have been very difficult for someone in Marc Bergevin's position, as well. At the time it's been mentioned, whether or not it be Stan Bowman, Kevin Cheveldayoff, Coach Quinville, there's just too many questions right now. I don't think people are wrong for looking towards those guys that still have jobs in the NHL today and saying, well, how did you not know? But you also can't sit there and just say, well, Marc Bergevin's a liar. At least not right now off of what we know.
Right. And I think, I don't know. I think it's just culturally, especially when dealing with something as heavy as this, it's very natural to just immediately grab your pitchfork and jump to conclusions. But I mean, there's enough legally going on and enough momentum behind this and curiosity that we will find out, why this story got buried. Because, the person who committed these acts has been they've seen legal punishment for their actions. So really, the thing that people are looking for is to figure out who buried this and why. And I think we don't know either of those things. So maybe, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say put your pitchforks away, because I think it's very natural to be outraged about this. But
it's the right response to hear of this story and be outraged. The idea
is you don't know who to be mad at yet, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
The idea of this story happening, the idea or the fact of the Chicago Blackhawks essentially giving this man a letter of recommendation and then knowing that he went on to hurt somebody else is incredibly screwed. I forget who the quote was from directly. I know I heard it on the Steve Dangle podcast. And Deej, I mentioned this to you before we started recording, but I think anybody trying to downplay this is a questionable person in and of themselves. The idea that apparently it's been said, oh, well, how could this have happened to a professional athlete? How could they allow themselves to be taken advantage of like that? Which, again, that narrative this type of incident cannot happen to an alpha type male. That someone who looks like Terry Crews can't sit there and have possibly been abused. Look at the size of his muscles. That shit needs to go. That is incredibly toxic and flat out needs to go, because I dare say the vast majority of people who have that opinion of I wouldn't let myself be a victim, you have no idea how you'd react in that moment. You're going to sit here and tell me with 100% certainty, look at my biceps. There's no way I'd freeze and be in a state of shock that was happening to me. You don't know until you're in that situation. Hate to tell you. So that idea of a very athletic individual can't possibly have that happen to them is beyond damaging in a situation like this. And in terms of other updates, subpoenas are being sent out essentially to everyone that could have possibly been involved, whether they're with the Blackhawks, the university, I think it was the University of Notre Dame, the University of Miami and Ohio, I think it was, anybody who could have possibly had any sort of connection to this is going to get interviewed. They're going to get as much information as they can. A lawyer has made 31 requests for documents from the Blackhawks related to the alleged abuse. And this was another quote that came out here. The Blackhawks have asked that the case be dismissed because it was not filed within a limitation period. The team also says that the former player's complaint should have been made via a workers' compensation claim. The Blackhawks have a pending motion to dismiss. If this court grants the Blackhawks' pending motion to dismiss, the plaintiff's case will likely be dismissed with prejudice and render discovery moot. Therefore, the parties should wait until this court renders its decision on the Blackhawks' pending motion to dismiss before engaging in discovery. So, yeah, even now, like, I'm sorry, I get the optics of this from the Blackhawks organization if nothing major happened. Like, if view this as, well, we don't think there's a story here, and we view this as them trying to drag our reputation through the mud. But the optics of this is, well, what the hell are they trying to hide? It's a pretty bad look, all things considered. It's the path deeds you would expect them to take legally, but they, in terms of, external investigations being done, basically there has not been a single move made by the Chicago Blackhawks here that paint them in a good light.
So, well, I don't. Well, so I'll say you can't really judge the Blackhawks by how they're handling this legally, because this isn't like, this states nothing to the motives of the Blackhawks. This is just, I mean, you hire a lawyer, your lawyer is there to get the case dismissed or reduced or make it so you need to get as few people as possible involved. And regardless of the wording, I don't think that really speaks to the ethics of the Blackhawks. And I think you have to like take legalese like this away from any sort of like emotional judgment.
Yeah.
But I think the bigger thing I was going to say, and I think this is the most important thing you brought up, is the absolutely, I think the mentioning Terry Crews is one of the best things you could have done, because it made, like, I mean, that's the perfect example, right? Like Terry Crews, who was assaulted, and then later he was like, hey, this happens to guys too, no matter what you look like, and talked about what had happened to him from a Hollywood executive. And I think that's exactly it, like Terry Crews is like, there is, if a car was on top of you and you needed somebody to move it, you would be like, oh, thank God Terry Crews was on the sidewalk. You know what I mean? So it just, it doesn't matter like who you are or what you look like. I mean, predators have a way of getting to you psychologically. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, this whole thing's dark. And I mean, it's one of those things that I wish I could not think about, but it's very much important to the world of hockey and the precedent it sets going forward. And I don't know. I guess I just am awaiting more information. And I guess for me, like, obviously, like, as a Panthers fan, like, innately, I want to be like, well, I hope Q wasn't involved in this. But if he was, then I get it. Like, I understand why there would be consequences for that. And it's just I think just like wild accusations are putting a lot of people in a lot of emotional places where they don't want to think about losing either beloved team or like members of their team or the staff or whatever. And it's a big mess right now. So it's very unfortunate.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like I said, it's obviously a shitty thing to have to discuss, but
yeah,
I don't think it'd be the right course of action to not talk about this and to do whatever little bit we can to kind of keep the spotlight on this particular story. Deej, with that, one of the harshest transitions we've ever had to do, but I think we go to the intro and then go on with the show as normal on the other side.
Yeah.
This is the intro now.
Well, we're back from an intro that probably should have been performed by Sinead O'Connor, but Went with one of my beats instead. Well, fuck. Might as well get the NSFW tag on this website or on this episode out of the way. Drop a nice little F-bomb to clear everything, and let's get to some warmies.
I'm excited. You said these are going to be decent ones. You've redeemed yourself from the infamous coldies. So I'm excited to see how this goes.
Even my girlfriend's sister-in-law, who's like, shout out Jax, she's a huge fan of the podcast. Even if her roommate says she can't listen to the podcast because my voice sounds like her ex. Let me know what your ex is up to. Have him call me because I might want to take a few sick days. Just call in, have somebody fill in. But yeah, she even referred to them as the coldies, which was unfortunate. So
can't bat 1,000, like they say. Like all great baseball players, you know what? They fail to get on base, 7 times out of 10?
Yeah, that's why I think we haven't even seen the greatest baseball players yet. So anyway, I think anybody that watched I'll call it what it is, the bloodbath in Tampa last night. I don't remember hearing a single forward's name called by the announcers last night from Montreal. Like, just every single player on that team other than Shea Weber just disappeared last night. And then it was just shot after shot on Carey Price. And then just, oh man, does Tampa look like an absolute freight train? And Montreal looks like they are stuck in the tracks. So that inspired today's warmies.
But yeah.
Train facts. No, so today's warmies is going to be Stanley Cup final sweeps.
Ooh.
Because who could watch last night's game outside of the province of Quebec and not be like, oh, Tampa in 4.
Fair.
So let's start with, I'll give you a little context. So the 7-game format was adopted in 1939. So since the 7-game format was adopted in 1939, if you had to take a guess, how many Stanley Cup finals have ended in a sweep? Given there's been about 75 of them, give or take.
I feel like it's gotta be relatively low. I mean, like one of the more recent ones to come, I genuinely, like right now I'm struggling to think if there's been one since 98. Or was it 97 Red Wings over the Capitals? How many have there been since then? I'm going to go with like 5.
There have been 20.
Jesus.
Which is
They have
hilarious.
to all be early.
So you would think so, right?
Yeah, I do. That's why I said it.
So you were correct there. That was a question I was going to ask. When was the most recent one? 97, 98. So the cap was instituted in 0405. So there has actually not been a sweep in the salary cap era. Which is interesting to think about. That said, do you happen to know what the longest streak of Stanley Cup finals ending in a sweep was? Just the number of finals in a row.
God, it must have been when Montreal was destroying worlds. I'm going to go with 3 in a row.
So it was actually 4 in a row.
Jesus.
And let me read off the years to you because you're going to find this fascinating.
Is this pre or post World War II?
94-95, the Devils defeat the Wings in a sweep. 95-96, the Avs defeat the Panthers in a sweep. 96-97, the Wings defeat the Flyers in a sweep. 97-98, the Wings defeat the Capitals in a sweep. So this was in the late 90s when quote unquote hockey was awesome and the logo was orange. Except for 1 year, the Eastern Conference was just getting absolutely wrecked. Like, they were just like, man, we got to give them this Crosby kid. And they were like, well, we still have Gretzky on the Rangers. And then he retires after this last sweep. And it was just not good.
I mean, in a way, though, I'm not surprised, right? I mean, honestly, like those cup years kind of blended together. Like, I don't know how many people. There's got to be a select few, obviously, that would know that by default. But I don't know how many people would recall, like, the Devils Red Wings being a sweep.
I feel like any Wings fan would know this stat because they were involved in 75% of these series, which is fascinating.
God, though, just like number one, obviously, like defense reigns supreme in that era, but as well, I mean, God, that's just a crazy stat. I mean, the Western Conference, it feels like for the vast majority of our lifetimes was the dominant conference, though.
Right? So that was the most recent sweep, was 97-98. Given that this was instituted in 1939, do you care to take a guess at the original sweep and which teams were involved? I'll give you a hint. It was in the original 6 era.
Well, yeah, you said the 30s, so. Oh, God. I mean, I want to say Boston and Toronto for the memes.
It's close. So in 1940-41 was the first 4-0 sweep, and it was Boston over Detroit. They got there. So this to me was, so these final 2 questions, right? Well, it's 3, because I'm going to throw in this third one because I feel like this is a lot of statistics and database questions, and there's one that I feel like I need to get a laugh out of. So we'll save that one for last. So, do you know which NHL franchise has been swept the most times in the Stanley Cup Finals?
Gonna go Detroit.
Yeah, it is Detroit.
I was gonna say
4 times.
You already mentioned 2 examples. One way back.
Well,
they
won 2 of those. And oh yeah, you know what? Yeah, I guess I have, haven't I? Yeah, because they lost to the Devils too.
Context clues, baby. I watched Jeopardy.
So there's 2 teams that have been swept 3 times. One of them is the Bruins, and we're going to save the last one for the final question. So do you know how many... So do you know which team, right? Let me phrase this correctly. Do you know which team has won the most finals by sweep and how many times?
I mean, the odds-on favorite is Montreal just due to the sheer amount of cups won.
So it is Montreal.
Yeah.
Do you care to take a guess at how many times they have swept the Stanley Cup Finals?
I'm going to say 5.
It's 6.
Jesus.
And what was even more interesting to me is that a lot of these, and you would think it would just be because of the original 6 era, but actually a lot of these were because the expansion teams were so bad when they split the league into 6 and 6 that Montreal just got to the finals and won. Like that's just so only one team has been swept. In NHL history, only one team has made it to the finals and gotten swept 3 years in a row. In a sad tale that only rivals the Buffalo Bills.
I was gonna say. Oh man.
Do you care to take a guess at which NHL team has been swept? They've been swept 3 times to tie the Bruins, and all 3 years were in a row.
All 3 years were in a row. Oh man.
I love the answer so much. It's just...
I feel like I know this, but man, I'm drawing a blank right now.
It's the St. Louis Blues.
Yeah, because when they first got there.
67, 68, 68, 69, and 69, 70. 3 years in a row. They made it to the Cup and didn't taste a single win against an original 6 team.
God, which doesn't surprise me because that's what it was. Like post-expansion, it was, here's the original 6 conference, and here's every other new team. And whoever made it out of that new team conference just got slaughtered in the finals. Every time. Like it wasn't until Philadelphia, I feel like,
did win.
Until they started making the Cup final that narrative started to change.
Yeah, they actually got swept twice on their way. So what's interesting to me, though, is that the Blues have only appeared in the finals 4 times. So they actually got swept 4 times in a row. And then it would be 50 years before they made it to the championship, or 3 times in a row. And then they had to wait 50 years to make it again.
And then what happened?
And then Gloria happened.
Boy, didn't she.
Yeah, right.
Damn it.
What was interesting though, and so this is actually incredibly fascinating, and you may have actually known this and I was surprised that this wasn't a more widely known fun fact because I tend to collect them. But that 69-70 sweep of the Blues was done by the Boston Bruins. So 50 years later, they got the rematch.
That they did. Yeah, that's where the famous Bobby Orr picture comes from. One of those finals. So
yeah, so that's today's Warmies. Stanley Cup sweeps. Will we see our first one in the salary cap era? Signs point to yes.
So with that said, Deej, before we get into more viewer questions here, fun fact, everybody, let's be honest. We only have like 2 games to talk about because we didn't get to talk about Game 7, Tampa and the Islanders. And of course, we have Game 1 of the Cup Finals. So there's going to be a lot of talking about other things. But Deej, before we get to our viewer questions, and for those of you who are watching the video portion of this podcast, you'll know Toog took this show on the road. We're back in the OG location. But just because, Deej, we're on the road does not mean that you don't also practice self-love and some self-care. And the perfect way to do that is with Manscaped, especially, Deej, the new Ultra Smooth package, which is perfect for traveling. It houses, Deej, arguably the cutest razor you've ever seen in your life. It is a top-notch product. If you're not watching the video portion, look at this thing. Look at it. Watch the video portion. This thing's hilarious.
It'll fit into any travel bag.
It would. It might get you stopped by the TSA, but what are you going to do?
That's right. Manscaped, the makers of the Lawnmower 4.0. You know what? You can have more than 3 consecutive sweeps on your body hair. Thanks to the Lawnmower 4.0. The Lawnmower 4.0, the only body razor equipped with a 10K or whatever it is LED headlight that'll make your stubble cast a shadow. You can really get in there and get it with this thing.
Indeed. The best thing about this new Ultra Smooth package, as you pointed out, it comes with this clear, essentially shaving gel. It's clear, so you can actually see what the hell you're doing. Imagine that. Revolutionary. You don't have to guess. Incredible.
Why did we get white shaving gel in the first place? Was it just was there like a Santa cosplay thing that people were into? I really don't want to think about it. But anyway,
our overlords at Big Gillette. You got nothing on Manscaped.
It's Big Santa. They're getting it all over our face. Anyway, Manscaped, home of the Lawnmower 4.0, home of the Weed Whacker, home of the Ultra Smooth package. Use code Tougie, Tougie, for 20% off at manscaped.com. Manscaped, your balls will thank you. They might even send you a card.
So with that, Deej, let's get into our viewer questions here, and I will throw it over to our lovely Discord, because there were, as you know, 2 questions I meant to add to the list here. This first one comes from one apathetic schizoid. And this was a conversation that I saw elsewhere on Twitter. Do you think Carey Price is the best goalie of the post-lockdown generation, or do you think it's Henrik Lundqvist? Now,
what is the post-lockdown generation?
I think he meant lockout.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, did I miss like a wave of music?
And I'm pretty sure he means in regards to like the 05 lockout. That would certainly make sense to me, as opposed to being like, oh yeah, who since the 2013 lockout? So looking then, shout out to Quant Hockey, QANT Hockey, who have some great sorting tools, including being able to directly look at goalie stats from the last 16 years. Now, in the last 16 years, I mean, it depends on how you'll want to look at it for sure, because you talk about who are the best goalies. Well, Marc-Andre Fleury is the winningest goalie in that time, has the cups to his resume. As we've talked about, Henrik Lundqvist, great goalie, shockingly only 1 Vezina, no cups. Roberto Luongo, incredible goalie, no cups. Ryan Miller, no cups. So really what you have to look at is, what do you care about when defining the best goaltender? And Deej and I had this conversation not all that long ago. Do you look at the hardware, the body of work, both? How much does the lack of a Stanley Cup affect someone's legacy? And when talking about the Hockey Hall of Fame, it affects it a lot. Again, Henrik Lundqvist, Roberto Luongo, I hate to say it, my opinion, surefire Hall of Famers, they might not make it first ballot. There might be some people like, well, they didn't win. That's just a sad reality of how the Hockey Hall of Fame voting works. So the only way I can think to phrase this is when you look at, again, the Fleuries, the Lundqvist, Luongo, Ryan Miller, Pekka Rinne, Carey Price, Jonathan Quick. Noted I'm going off of wins. Cam Ward, Tuukka Rask, Kari Lehtinen. Those are the top 10 in wins since the 05 lockout. And then, of course, lower than that, you have the likes of Bobrovsky, Holtby, Brodeur, funny enough. Mike Smith, Kiprusoff, Corey Crawford. Like, the list just goes on. And Andrei Vasilevsky, of course, in that mix now, too, in terms of, a winning goaltender. And obviously, Connor Hellebuck also kind of getting up the list of wins. I mean, in terms of defining best goalie of the post-lockout era, I mean, Deej, what are your parameters here to help make that decision? Because it's not an easy decision by any means.
Yeah. I don't know really how you even... Because I feel like, in general, the actual process of goaltending and the style and your role with the team has changed in the last 15 years. So I think the metrics, and I really hate that this is the answer, but the metric is the eye test. I think that's really the only metric that stands up. Aside from wins and hardware, and eye test are the only thing you can really judge this on, I think.
So I mean, it's almost the sense of, I guess, framing the question of, if you could have one goaltender in net, must win Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final, who are you going with?
I gotta think.
No complaints about, well, what's the team in front of them look like? How's the defensive
still
systems?
Gotta be Brodeur. I mean, even though like the majority of his career happened in the pre-lockout era, the fact that he played in it's still at an extremely high level. I still think Marty Brodeur is the guy.
So he played in 526 games after the 05 lockout. Had a .913 save percentage in that time as well, which is equal to
games played.
Which is equal to Jonathan Quick's regular season numbers, by the way.
Oh. Interesting. In terms of game played, where does that put him on the list? Like that how many goalies have played that many games?
He is 19th.
Okay. I think I still go with Brodeur. I mean, I gotta say, and I hate that this was my gut reaction, but Vasilevsky's a close second.
It's fair.
I don't know. Like, I mean, obviously, Carey Price is probably fourth on my list, maybe.
Let's be honest. Price is obviously the main person to list off right now because he is on one of the best playoff runs of all time.
Yeah.
But if you take that recency bias out of there, is that the guy? And I mean, since the entire conversation surrounding Carey Price has been, well, screw the regular season, it's all about the playoffs. In terms of the past, again, I think I can look at the past 15 seasons or so here worth of data, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, I can look at the past 16. So if you look out of the goaltenders post-lockout, I mean, the most playoff games played, Marc-Andre Fleury with 162. But he has a .912 save percentage in that time. The top guy in terms of save percentage since the 05 lockout in the playoffs is Tim Thomas. Tim Thomas played in 51 playoff games and has a .933 save percentage. The top three are
interesting.
You have Mike Smith, 29 playoff games, a .931, and Jonas Hiller with 33 playoff games in that time with a .930. Then you have Craig Anderson, Chris Osgood, Braden Holtby, Tuukka Rask is an eighth with a .925 save percentage in that time. Vasi's at a .923, Quick at a .922, same as Lundqvist. So again, how do you rate it? Like Carey Price, his career, he has 88 playoff games. He has a .919 save percentage in the playoffs. Save percentage isn't everything, I know. But it just goes to that point. There are so many different metrics to look at, so many different ways to, I guess, label who you deem as the best goalie in this era. Like I said, though, if I view it off of who's the one guy I could have, I mean, call it bias, but Tim Thomas is top 3 minimum.
Here's a way I'll answer. I'll answer this question with another question. Okay, so here's how you should look at this. Are the Montreal Canadiens a better team with Andrei Vasilevsky in net? And if your answer is anything other than absolutely, I don't see how you're looking at this. You know what I mean? Are the Tampa Bay Lightning a worse team if Carey Price is in net?
There's a lot of people who will say no, they're not, and that they're just as good.
So I don't know.
And maybe I don't know. I mean, those two have been pretty damn close in terms of their performance in the playoffs. It's one of those questions that we've probably given way too much thought to because there's just so many different ways to look at it. But yeah, I mean, look, if you sit here and say I'd take Henrik Lundqvist, I don't blame you. If you say I'd take Carey Price, Jonathan Quick, Tim Thomas, like, it really does depend on what do you value: the regular season, the playoffs, the hardware, the success. I mean, goddamn. Yeah. Do you value the longevity? Because Cam Ward's played the 6th most amount of games as a goaltender in that time. He is one of 6 goalies to play over 700 games in that time. So do you value like, oh, 2006 Cam Ward was amazing? Like, it depends. So it's an interesting question, at least. Another question here, Deej, that we've kind of talked about before. It's from AJ. Does the CBA need to change to not have teams be over the salary cap in the playoffs?
I mean, do you put the rule? I think that's. I don't think so.
I'm cool with it not changing. And again, I'm still very much on the side of, if you're whinging about this, get over yourselves. The Tampa Bay Lightning aren't breaking any rules as it's written. You cannot be mad at a team for breaking imaginary rules, or, well, it should be a rule and they're cheating because it should be a rule. You can't blame them for that. All you do is come off as salty that your team wasn't able to do this. I know I am. Are you kidding me? I wish the Bruins had been able to do something like this. My God. Is it skirting the rules? Maybe, but it's not breaking the rules, so shut up. Is the idea of a player must have this many games played in the regular season to be eligible for the playoffs? Is that a valid conversation to have and a potentially valid rule? Sure.
I think that's how they should go about it. I think if you do, that's how you should go about it. It shouldn't be like teams must be cap, like, because almost no team is cap compliant in the playoffs.
I mean, it was brought up that you've had these other teams around this time. I think it was Urinating Tree that actually brought it up in his Cup final preview video, where he mentioned, like, look, Toronto does this, and everyone's just like, oh man, Kyle Dubas is so good. It almost has the feeling of like, oh, well, here's this Southern team that's doing this. And it does feel like a lot of the complaints are coming from these old school hockey fans who are like, this Southern team, Tampa fans suck. Southern fans don't deserve hockey. And hey, maybe that is where a lot of the critiques are coming from, because it's true. There have been teams over the cap in the past couple of years. I mean, the Chicago Blackhawks in 2015, I think, was a good example. They were over the cap when they beat Tampa Bay in that series, if I'm not mistaken. There have been other examples, but no one's bitched about it this much until Tampa's done it. And is it because of the amount that they're over? Is it the fact that it's Nikita Kucherov, their best player, and in my money, the Conn Smythe winner right now that's doing this? I don't know. But yeah, if you want to implement that rule to say you need some regular season time to be eligible for the playoffs, kind of similar, Deej, to what we see where it's like, okay, you need this many games in the playoffs to even get your name on the cup. If you want to have parameters like that, by all means.
Yeah, I think that's how you do it, because I think this, when you complain about Tampa's cap situation, I think you're missing the elephant in the room, which is, when will we ever see an NHL team that has almost 25% of their salary cap on IR make the playoffs again? Which I think speaks to how good this Tampa team is.
That's how you've chosen to view it all season, is the idea of look, you can bitch about them being over, but yeah, how many teams could have valuable players like that, or their best player miss the entire regular season, shortened or not, and still make the playoffs, let alone be as good and competitive as they were in the regular season?
Now, that said, the more I think about it, I do think that minimum game thing does need to be in place, because could you imagine if, like, let's take what I believe to be the worst contract in the NHL, in the with it, probably in the Sergei Bobrovsky contract. I'm sure if I really thought about it, I could think of a worse one. This becomes a very different conversation if you have like an overpaid veteran that sucks. Like, let's say the Erik Karlsson contract, right? Let's say Erik Karlsson suddenly gets injured and Doug Wilson spends that money, and then the Sharks make the playoffs, and then Karlsson's back. Then I think this is a very different conversation about cap circumvention. But I think because Stamkos and Kucherov are such quality players that it's not necessarily, it's more incredible that this happened than it is that I'm upset at Tampa. That said, though, I do think there needs to be a minimum played thing for the playoffs.
Yeah,
I think that's how you prevent cap circumvention from going forward. And I mean, there's players are always going to be over the cap limit when it comes to the playoffs because of the players you call up, trade deadline deals, because they don't prorate playoff salary like they do in the regular season. Like, that's where, if you're ever on Cap Friendly, you see like trade or deadline salary space is because players missed certain games. So technically, because salary is prorated over games, it accrues over time. It's really complicated if you look into it. But yeah, I just don't think we'll ever see another instance where 25% of your salary is on superstars that are still performing like superstars, and then you make the playoffs.
Move on to our next question here from one Thomas Shea. Question for not Toog the Toolman 24, but instead his trusty, lightly bearded co-host Deej. Can you make a Warmies section in the future all about Home Improvement the show or Home Improvement the activity? I also just want a Deej intro around this concept, please.
I mean, we'll see how dire the news gets around the summer.
Right. We're going to need some content.
Like, I don't know. We'll be like, this character never revealed his face on the show Home Improvement, and in the finale takes a bow in front of the audience wearing a fence over his face. Be like, that's Wilson. Be like, correct. That's right. Wilson wore a weird fence mask on his face in the finale. So honestly, I've had this ready to go for months. That said, do you know what Wilson's last name was? Or do you know what Wilson's last name was, Tougie?
Wilson, wasn't it?
It was Wilson W. Wilson. So, you know, we'll get there.
God.
You know, and I don't know. I wouldn't even say it's a beard thing. I think people just take care of houses. Sometimes it comes in all gray and sparse, and you still can wield a hammer.
We'll move on. This comes from Alex Eddy. What happens with Vladimir Tarasenko? Now, DH, I think this developed from a Frank Saravalli article mentioning the latest on Tarasenko, D'Angelo, and Ekman-Larsson. Of course, Tony D'Angelo, we're all kind of waiting to see what the hell happens there. Not really. I don't give a shit about him. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, of course, the rumors have been out there that the Coyotes are looking to move him again, which, okay, good luck. Even if he does have more examples of teams he'd be willing to go to, who, I'm sorry, we talked about that. That's one of the worst contracts in the league. But Vladimir Tarasenko's name has been passed around for a couple of years now. And obviously, I think the reason why he hasn't been traded yet is they won the Cup in 2019. But the idea is, you know, his name's still floating around out there. And for Vladimir Tarasenko, you look at the contract that he still has, Deej. He's got 2 years left. Does have a no trade clause, but 2 years left at $7.5 million. Obviously, for him, as of late, you've had some injury concerns. He has played 34 regular season games in the past 2 years. He does have 24 points in those time, in that time. Of course, the year they won the Cup, he was solid, man. He had 68 points, 33 goals in 76 games in the regular season, had 17 points in 26 games en route to the Cup. Last two playoff appearances, though, 8 games, 2 points. both of them goals. So arguably the idea of the Blues moving on from Vladimir Tarasenko, is it what's best for them? I mean, you free up $7.5 million to go along with the apparent $17 million that you already have, and good things can happen. Especially too, because with that $17 million, you have Mike Hoffman, Tyler Bozak, Jaden Schwartz as UFAs. Barbashev, Sanford, Kyrou, Robert Thomas, Vince Dunn are RFAs. There's a lot of money they have to spend this offseason as it is. So the idea of moving on from Tarasenko, again, isn't perhaps the worst idea, but when he plays, you know, he's done pretty well. Although you can say the trajectory this season, it was heading south, and especially too with the injury concerns, you have to wonder like how much more does he necessarily have in the tank? Like, you know, majority of his metrics this year weren't great. So what's next for him? I mean, I can't imagine him being dealt necessarily, because what the hell, you're not going to get much for him unless the main idea is just, well, deal him so that we don't have to deal with this cap hit.
So I think for me, and I think the thing that needs to be stated about the situation is the first thing that comes to mind when you say Vladimir Tarasenko is the statement his wife made, where she was concerned about him returning to hockey because one more shoulder injury would not just be career ending, it would be life altering. And the thing about shoulders is they are incredibly fragile. Like a shoulder does not get stronger with each injury. That joint is very much a very fragile thing. And so I think the answer, like the question is, who is going to want to give $7.5 million for a guy who is going to lose the ability to use his arm if someone sneezes at him the wrong way? And I think that's like, I mean, that's the issue. Like, it's just
as harsh as
it's like Tarasenko's still Tarasenko, but at the end of the day, like, what do you get? 6 months of Tarasenko? It's like, you know, it's one of those things where it's not like everything's magically going to come back together and his shoulder's better than ever. Like the man has had 4 shoulder surgeries. Like, you know,
so, yeah, I mean, I think that's the issue too, right? The idea of like, well, pull a Tampa and have him get another surgery and then be ready for the playoffs. It's like another surgery for him. That could be it. It's not like just get this surgery and everything will be fine. It's like the problem is like he's already screwed up.
Yeah.
Like the wear and tear is already there. So I don't know what's next for him here, just because, like you said, like there's a lot of hard miles. Maybe LTIR for the next couple seasons. That way the Blues get their cap alleviation. I mean, yeah, maybe Tarasenko does go the way of some of the other guys. He's not even 30 years old yet, as far as I know. But yeah, maybe he does go the way of just, you know, that early retirement. Could see it happening. I mean, what more does he I mean, aside from, of course, from the love of the sport, it's not all about money or success. But I mean, in terms of the career earnings for Tarasenko on Cap Friendly, $47 million. He has a Stanley Cup to his credit. He's 29 years old, turns 30 in December. Who's to say? I mean, obviously for me, it's just like, well, hopefully he's, you know, the one thing I think you hope for pretty much all hockey players. I mean, there are some people where it's, you know, some like look, even Matt Cook, not a fan of his on the ice at all. He shouldn't have been out there. Seriously hurt some people. I don't sit here on a daily basis and say, boy, I hope Matt Cook has a shit quality of life. You know? So
it's just, I hope he has a limp. Just like, yeah, you don't do that. You just like, I mean, if you're a professional athlete, you're willing to sacrifice your body for the game. So Tarasenko is going to do whatever it takes to keep putting pucks in nets. The answer is, will his body match that? And I think that's a no. And I think if the Blues are thinking about trading him, it indicates something is up. Because if he could still be Vlad Tarasenko, they wouldn't even be thinking about trading him, you know?
Right. So our next question here then is from Tyson. Thoughts on the Ryan Nugent-Hopkins extension? A deal he signed earlier today. It is a new 8-year deal, a cap hit of $5,125 per. And to be honest, I think it's a phenomenal deal. I mean, everyone was saying, like, how the hell are they going to keep Ryan Nugent-Hopkins? Like, this is a guy who's going to make bare minimum $6 million on the open market. And yeah, justifiably so. And instead, apparently, he wanted the term. He wanted the security. I mean, he's 27 years old, wants that term and security heading into the latter stages of his career. And for Edmonton, that's a sacrifice you make because you have a fantastic top six option for just over $5 million a season. Like, that is the type of deal that you need players like Nuge to take so that you can pay Draisaitl and McDavid and still try to make it work. So I think it's a phenomenal deal.
I think adjusted for like cap inflation, this is probably pretty similar to like the Tyler Johnson contract that he took way back when. And that's, I mean, it's like you said, that's exactly what you want because Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is a good player. He's the third best player on this team. And you mark in that the Oilers' biggest weakness is, I mean, well, obviously the quality of the on-ice product, but the biggest weakness the Oilers have is they're constantly changing stuff. And now you've got this guy that's signed until McDavid turns 32. So you're just like, you know, he's good to go. He'll be 36. He'll have bought that Toyota Tundra on whatever there is to do in Alberta. Find the third T-Rex. I don't know. Whatever else there is to do in Alberta. That's right. They only found 2 of them. That's right. You look it up. Don't believe the lies. There were only 2 Tyrannosauruses. And I don't know. I think this is a phenomenal deal. It's what you want from a high-end role player.
Can we name the episode Twin Tyrannosaurus?
Oh, we're gonna name it Don't Believe the Lies or 2 Tyrannosauruses.
Fair enough.
Something that points people towards the truth. They didn't find a lot of them. That's why it cost Nicolas Cage so much to buy that Tyrannosaurus skull, and that's why he's bankrupt now. These are real things.
Oh, God. We'll move on to our next question. This comes from Ian Folletti, if I'm not mistaken. Why is it coming home, and do you believe it will stay home? Deej, do you know what this is in reference to?
I believe this is referencing to gosh, what was the year? This is a joke. Let me look this up real quick just so I'm correct. Okay, yeah, this is a reference to something that happened in 2018. Basically, Canada legalized weed, and then all of our questions from north of the border stopped making sense.
So this is in reference to Euro 2020. In case you couldn't tell, Deej doesn't give a shit about football, but that's okay. I do. So Deej, it's in reference to whether or not you think England will be able to win Euro 2020.
So they're a year late.
It's still being called Euro 2020 for the sake of simplicity, I guess.
So this is the this is like FIFA, but they just don't invite the teams that are good. That's what this is? That's the Euro Cup?
Every region has their own tournament like this. So like the US has their own kind of thing. That's also, goes on as well. And essentially you have the quote unquote regional tournaments every couple of years. And then of course you have the World Cup. So every 2 years they're supposed to alternate. So every 2 years it's like, okay, you have the European Championship, you have the, South America and everything. And then obviously you get the World Cup 2 years after that. So it goes all on the schedule of Winter Olympics, Summer Olympics, where it goes region, World Cup, region, World Cup. So right now it's in that kind of, I guess, regional phase to try and frame this properly for you. So yeah, that's what the Euros are. Do you think England will be able to win?
So let me provide you. So I don't follow any of this. I couldn't tell you the players on any of these teams. I do know who the final 8 teams are. So let me provide you with a statistical analysis of why I am betting Ukraine will win.
Okay, so here, let's go through the matchups really quick, okay? Let's do this, and that way I can give my thoughts. The round of 16, Belgium beat Portugal, which, yeah, Belgium's sick. Portugal, they looked really shaky in the group stage. It's not really surprising, even though they were defending champions, as Deej could have totally told you. Italy beating Austria, not surprising whatsoever. Italy's been unreal. So, Deej, that sets the stage for Belgium and Italy. Who's going to win?
Well, let me look up the only statistic I'm going by real quick, which will explain why I believe Ukraine takes the whole thing in a second. And it's going to make perfect sense. So I'll bring this home in a minute, and I promise it's not ridiculous. So each of these matchups is going to be determined the same way that every matchup in the previous round was determined, other than Switzerland, France. And that is the country with the higher population won. And basically, because football is such a simple game, the larger your population, the better soccer players you are going to produce. And Ukraine is the second most populous country in Europe behind Russia. So that's why I think Ukraine takes it.
Interesting. Okay. As well, if you don't want to, I mean, you think they're going to take it, so it's fine. I'll mention my thoughts, though, because I paid attention to the tournament here. When it comes to Italy, Belgium, I want to back Italy, but I think Belgium's going to win. Sorry. The Switzerland-France game was absolutely insane. Deej, to explain this, Switzerland scored first like 15 minutes in. Crazy. France are the defending World Cup champions from 2 years ago. Massive underdogs. Yeah. And so Switzerland's up 1-0, and you're like, oh, cool. Then in like the 55th minute, Switzerland gets a penalty. And you're like, oh my God, they're going to make it 2-0. That penalty gets stopped. France scores 2 goals in like 3 minutes. They're up 2-1. Then France gets another goal. It's 3-1. Then with like 5 minutes to go, Switzerland gets one. And you're like, that's nice. Too little, too late. And then Switzerland tied it right before the end of the game. You're like, oh my God, this might actually happen. Now, earlier in the day, a similar thing had happened between Spain and Croatia, where Croatia was down. They tied it right at the end. Like if they didn't score it, the game was probably going to be over. And then they went on to extra time, and Spain ended up beating them 5-3. So they scored 2 goals in the extra time, smoked them. So everyone thought the same thing was going to happen with Switzerland. It went all the way to penalties. Switzerland beat them in a penalty shootout, which is just one of the biggest upsets ever. So that sets up Switzerland and Spain, where, I mean, same thing. You want to root for Switzerland. And honestly, Spain should win by all accounts. I think Switzerland, I want them to win. It'd be hilarious because Spain have looked vulnerable multiple times in this tournament. So hoping for Switzerland in that matchup. And then as Deej mentioned, Ukraine beat Sweden earlier today. Another last-minute goal to win it. It was nuts. Stopped it from going to a shootout. Sweden were down to 10 men. England beat Germany 2-0, which is crazy. It's the first time England's beaten Germany in like 50 years. There was another choke. The Netherlands, who were undefeated in the group stage, lost to the Czech Republic, which is crazy. And then Denmark beat Wales because, of course, Wales lost. It's Wales. But so you have Denmark still in it, which, Deej, you might have been somewhat familiar with Denmark. Christian Eriksen was the player that collapsed and almost died on the field a couple weeks ago.
They also make Legos.
They also make Legos.
I don't know. Yeah, I didn't hear anything about this.
You didn't hear that? Wow, that was like worldwide news too. Regardless, there are some great underdog stories in it. And then there's a team like England that still like to pretend that they're an underdog, even though they're just perennial underachievers. So they're the Montreal Canadiens of this tournament. So
Fair.
England's going to make it to the finals and lose to Belgium or Italy. There you go. It's not coming home, as it turns out. Remember that's how that whole segment started?
Yeah, I guess so. There were a lot of things I needed to look up there with stats. And I still think if you just bet on the country with the highest population every single year, you'd probably be in the money, because people are sitting there and they're asking questions like, will Switzerland beat Spain, when like the fundamental fact is every single player on Spain, which has 6 times the population as Switzerland, had to beat out 6 more dudes than the people on Switzerland had to beat. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how it works. So hopefully I'm not completely wrong, because I really like the idea of calling this tournament while not watching a single game or being able to name a single player still in the tournament.
Delightful. I love that Ukraine might be one of the biggest underdogs left, and they are one of the biggest underdogs left in the tournament. So, hey, if you're right, it's going to be hilarious.
That's what Russia wants you to think.
We go to our final viewer question. This comes from Kamoka. So do you and Deej plan on doing a full Seattle expansion draft protection list style? Yes, We've said it
No,
on
we're
every
shutting down
show.
the podcast. We're going to
Yes.
start talking about super soakers for 3 months. It's the summer.
We're not going to, everyone else is going to be talking about the thing, so we're not going to talk about the thing. This is turning into a home improvement / fishing podcast as of whenever Tampa decides to win the Stanley Cup.
It's like, how much PSI should be illegal in your backyard? It's like, I don't know. The Super Soaker Podcast.
So with that, Deej, shall we actually talk about the thing? Because people mentioned the thing. Shall we talk about the thing? And that would be the ongoing series.
Well, I mean, I guess, should we do a Islanders post-mortem first, I guess?
Yeah, we probably should. We
Just chronologically, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, I mean, so that happened the night of the last show. Game 7, Islanders Lightning. Lightning win it by the score of 1-0, holding the Islanders to just 18 shots in the process. Yannis Gord scored in the second, shorthanded, and that was it. Now, I'll say this in the aftermath. I mean, you know, all things considered, as far as the game goes, I mean, Tampa kind of had them where they wanted them. It's a shame that Nassau goes out the way that it did. I mean, granted, good Game 6 victory, but that was the last game and nobody knew it at the time. You knew that there was a chance of it. I will say, though, when talking about this, and obviously we'll get to the Lightning in a minute because they moved on, and getting to this Islanders postmortem, I do think, you know, you look at the core of this team, and obviously we've praised Barry Trotz ad nauseum on this show, but you look at some of the members of this team as well, and I think Matt Barzal's reactions in the post-game presser, like practically in tears, talking about how disappointed he was to not be able to get guys like Andy Green, Travis Zajac, Josh Bailey, you know, the veterans on the team, you know, over the hump and to that final step. But we look at what's ahead for the Islanders now. They don't have their first this year. They don't have their second. They do have Colorado's second. So no first round pick this year. In terms of player re-signings right now, they are listed with having just under $6 million in available space. And up right now are UFAs Kyle Palmieri, Travis Zajac, and Casey Cizikas, who I can't help but think is going to be back. Michael Dow-Cole is an RFA. Anthony Beauvillier is an RFA. And he's, I mean, the most you could expect was a bridge deal, in my opinion. I mean, 13 points in 19 playoff games. Like, Anthony Beauvillier is a really strong part of their future. Defensively, Braden Coburn, Andy Green are up, and Adam Pelech is an RFA. So you have, just from the skater group, the big names to worry about: Anthony Beauvillier as an RFA, of course, Zizekas and Palmieri, again, UFAs. Adam Pelech is an RFA, and Ilya Sorokin is an RFA as well. Now, I don't know if Cap Friendly takes into account the money that will go on injured reserve for Johnny Boychuk yet. It does have him in that section. But point being, this team has to clear a little bit of cap from the looks of it. I don't really see, if Cap Friendly is correct as of this moment, where they have the money to bring back this core as it stands. So the obvious shouts, I think, that you're looking at potentially moving on from, I mean, Cal Clutterbuck's making 3.5, deals up at the end of next year. Leo Komarov's making $3 million. I mean, maybe you try to move on from Nick Leddy at 5.5. Like, I don't think Nick Leddy's horrible, but would I rather be paying Adam Pelech 5.5 over Nick Leddy? Yeah. So, as has been the case, of course, Deej, throughout all of this, you get into a situation where you have a team that it's clear they need to make moves, and especially for the New York Islanders here now, you lost Devon Toews. And I'm sorry, like, I know they've made it to back-to-back conference finals. I still say if they kept Devon Toews, if you find a way to move Nick Leddy last year, and then this year you have Pelech, Pulock, Toews as your top 3 defenders, that top 3 can compete with the likes of, Ellis, Ekholm, and Yossi in Nashville. Like, that is a dynamite top 3. They might not have the same name value. That is a dynamite top 3. So I feel like they've already allowed mistakes to happen. in players that they've let go of. And if they're not careful, I think they're going to lose more bits and pieces off of this team that are ultimately going to set them back perhaps too far, to the point where they can't necessarily hang like they could over the past 2 years. So, I mean, for the Islanders in general, it's great to make it to back-to-back conference finals. It's a shame it had to be against Tampa both times. Trust me, as a Bruins fan, I know how frustrating that is to have to run into Tampa all the time in the playoffs. But I don't know exactly what they do here, because they are a team that, in my opinion, is going to be looking at Seattle and saying, for the love of God, like, can you take this contract of Andrew Ladd's that we're trying to bury? I mean, Deej, Andrew Ladd is still, he's on the books for $5.5 million for the next 2 seasons. They have the contract buried, but that only saves them $1.2 million against the cap every year. If you free up that near $4.5 million worth of salary, that's probably Beauvillier and Pelech taken care of with the cap that you have open. Like, this team, I'm sorry, Seattle, you talk about the teams that they have in like the most vulnerable of situations here, to where Seattle's going to say, if you don't want to pay up, that's fine, have fun. The Islanders are going to have to pay up here to get out of this situation.
Yeah, they are. I mean, Tampa also in a similar situation. The Islanders, there is an enormous red flag that I haven't seen anybody talk about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about it. So who's the best player on this Islanders team? Matthew Barzal. I don't think anybody would argue with you that it's not Matt Barzal. Matt Barzal in the playoffs. Well, that's why they don't have microphones. So anyway, Matt Barzal, 14 points in 19 games. You know who else played 19 games in the playoffs with an eliminated team? William Karlsson, who put up 16 points in 19 games. Right? So Matt Barzal's pretty good, but he's not the type of guy that drags your team to a Stanley Cup. And you combine that with something that I am going to call...
I'll say at least not yet. He's 24, so he could still develop into that. In his defense. Well, so I think that's not like my main point here, right? Is that like, obviously Barzal can still get good. He's not there yet. My main point is not a single person has come out and said, well, the Islanders would be in the final if Anders Lee wasn't hurt. That's fair. I mean, because I think
nobody's even making that point because it's not a thing.
I think the issue too for Anders Lee, right, is that I don't recall their exact cap situation, but I'm pretty sure like you wouldn't have gotten Palmieri if Anders Lee wasn't hurt, because you wouldn't have had the space and it wouldn't have been necessary. Like, they would have gone in a different direction.
Yeah, I mean, he's making $7 million.
I think that also might just be an indictment on Anders Lee, like his reputation. Like Matt Barzal, in terms of star quality, name power, has that reputation over Anders Lee, even though Anders Lee is, the highest or tied for the highest paid player on the team, makes the same amount, and he's the captain.
Yeah, I think like I'm kind of skirting around my main point, which is that there's no clutch factor on this Islanders team. Like, you can take in the two guys tied for your highest paid player on a team that is strapped with cap issues, and one of them can't get it done yet, maybe in the future. And then the other guy, nobody's even making a point that he would have gotten it done. And I think that if I'm an Islanders fan, I'm starting to panic a little when I don't have a draft pick in the top 60 coming into this offseason.
That's been their identity, though, right? Is like, okay, we don't need a star because we have the best coach in the league, and we make up for that lack of star power by having, I guess, that maximum level of teamwork. I think the issue is for them, and Barry Trotz mentioned it too, talking about how the final of Game 7 was 1-0 for the Lightning, and he was asked, do you think your lack of firepower up front was the problem? He's like, well, you wouldn't be saying that if we won this game 1-0. So
yeah, I guess
it's a problem, right? Because the problem is they ran into a team that has that incredible star power, and they lost. Went to 7, but they still lost.
I think my statement like if I'm trying to look for something that sounds cool, like it'll look cool in a quote, about this is that when I look at the style they play, their lack of clutch players, I would say this to Barry Trotz and the style of Islanders hockey. I would say it doesn't matter how many bronze medals you win, nobody will ever trade them in for a gold.
So the post-mortem on the New York Islanders. Deej, shall we talk about game one of the Tampa Bay Lightning Montreal Canadiens Stanley Cup final, which is still incredibly weird to say. Now, I will mention this. Power plays last night, 3 for Tampa, 2 for Montreal. Now, note, Chris Lee was not and will not be officiating in the finals, so clearly every ref is biased against the Habs because Tampa had the power play advantage.
Yeah,
Allow me to be petty for a minute.
Well, so I don't even think I mean, what's weird to me is that like the power play advantages aren't really what bothered me about this game. What bothered me was like the things they did call as penalties are usually the things they let slide. And then the things they let slide are the things that I think should be penalties. And I think that goes for both teams. Like, I feel
like that's been the story of the entire season.
Yeah.
Especially the playoffs.
And I was just hoping, I mean, obviously, like, you know, hopes and dreams, obviously, I got to be a realist here. I was hoping they'd get their shit together for this and ref it. But they didn't.
Not going to happen.
I mean, what do you expect when the Western Conference champions, quote unquote, are from a more Eastern, more city than the Tampa Bay Lightning? So
it's like when Toronto used to be in the Western Conference full time. It's like, well, what are you going to do?
Yeah. I don't, obviously, like, it didn't matter if Chris Lee was the ref or not. Like, the reffing was still messed up. So I don't necessarily think it was biased against the Habs or for the Habs. Like, obviously it ended up being in Tampa's favor, but I don't even know what you do.
To me, it's just making a joke.
Oh no, I know. I'm just saying, like, on the whole, I just think, like, when I say I think I was just trying to clarify that when I say the reffing was messed up, that I don't think it was biased here. I just think that it was dumb calls that when they should have missed. Like, it's just so obvious to the casual fan that it's got to be, like, it's infuriating almost.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, no, I mean, I agree with the takes of how can the NHL expect to be making more, you know, casual fans when the product has been like this, and if they look into it and see the hardcore fan base going, what the fuck? Like, it's not a good way to build a brand, you know?
Yeah.
It's just not. That said, in terms of the rest of game one, obviously, first 2 periods or so, it was relatively close. Eric Chernock scored the opener on this really kind of weird deflection. There wasn't too much Carey Price could do on that one. Yanni Gourde gets the second one. Ben Sherratt ties it late in the second, and you think, okay, cool, maybe we have a game here. And then Tampa just killed him in the third period. Killed him. Yes. Kucherov with 2 goals. Stamkos gets the 5th, his 8th of the playoffs, his power play goal as well, which broke the Canadiens' PK streak. That was their first power play goal allowed in 13 games, which is just stupid. 13 games. It's the Lightning's first ever Game 1 victory in the finals. It's their 4th time making the finals. Of course, they made it in 2004, lost Game 1 to Calgary. They made it in 2015, lost Game 1 to Chicago. They made it last year and lost Game 1 to Dallas. Of course, they have won 2 out of 3 times, and they're looking to make it 75%. So, Deej, the highlights from this game, aside from the scoreline, which some people argue is not necessarily indicative, Tampa was the better team. And I said as much on Twitter last night, because in the aftermath of the game, I saw a whole lot of excuses being made. And I said this, and I'll quote this tweet. I'll quote this tweet verbatim. You can tell what Habs fans actually have no confidence in their team by who is currently seething and grasping for any excuse possible. It's one game, you got rocked, quit your bitching and pony up for game 2. I'm not saying it's just become habits for some Habs fans to go excuse, refs, this. But that is exactly what I'm saying is for some Habs fans, and I'm not even saying those are the ones worth listening to. Every team, you know, every fan base has their, their questionable supporters. But I can't view this as anything else other than Montreal got outplayed by the better team. We have seen throughout the playoffs. It happened, with the likes of Vegas. Of course, when they got rocked by Colorado in game 1, it's happened. The first game isn't necessarily a guarantee to set how the rest of the series is going to go. So I don't think sitting there grasping for excuses is the way to go. It's just Tampa was the better team in game 1.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I think it was really interesting, right? Because usually when you see, I mean, that's the thing with hockey games, when there's a difference between teams and nobody's making huge mistakes, is they like the weaker team falls apart in the third. I don't even really think they necessarily fell apart as much as they just stopped being able to keep up. And I feel like I should stress that in my mind, falling apart and not being able to keep up are very different things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just what happened, was they just ran out of stamina to be able to keep up with Tampa style of hockey. Like how many, like there's only so many minutes Philip Deneau can play in a night, you know? And on this Tampa team that's so loaded with stars, and you've got like one defensive forward answer to shut them down, that it just, you know, I think Montreal, though, has shown they're scrappy, and they're the type of team that can very easily regroup and perhaps come up with a game plan that makes it seem as if they're not going to get absolutely railroaded in game 2, you know?
It's the problem that every team discovers when they play this Tampa squad. It was the same thing last year, Deej. Every team has like an identity, but the problem is there isn't a single team in the NHL right now that Tampa can't match styles with. The New York Islanders, the defensive shutdown, gritty style, Tampa can do it, and they can do it just as well. This high-flying hockey featuring like young superstars like Suzuki and Caulfield, Tampa can do it just as good, if not better. I mean, Kucherov's not the youngest guy in the world, but you look at Kucherov, you look at Point. Tampa can match them in every regard. And that's not a slight at Montreal. Like I said, that's been the answer for everybody. Like the Boston Bruins, for example. Here's the Bruins top line. Oh my God, can Tampa match? Oh, yeah, somehow Tampa can match that Bruins top line. Can Tampa match the goaltending? Yes, they can. Can Tampa match the physicality of the Bruins defense? Yeah, like you can essentially do that for every single team. Good luck finding a team that can outdo Tampa in more than one aspect, let alone multiple. It's just the way that they're built. Now, as well, in terms of highlights, Deej, we should talk about Brendan Gallagher somehow not ending up in a hospital. Got into a scrum in the third period. From the looks of it, it depends on your perspective. I can't really tell if the takedown was attempted by Sergachev or if it was more so like Gallagher felt they were going down. It looked to me, call me biased if you want, like Gallagher's like, okay, screw you. And he went to go for like the judo hip toss. And Sergachev just didn't go. And then Gallagher, you know, thank God he's not seriously hurt, but he fell and hit his head and crunched his neck on the ice. And it looked horrific. He came up bloodied. Like that could have been incredibly nasty. And I saw a buddy of ours, Tyler Horsfall, formerly known as, or still known as the Flopfish on Twitter, formerly with the A. He mentioned like, so how long until we see someone like Brendan Gallagher get crippled in an event that has nothing to do with hockey? And it's kind of true. I mean, the idea of what exactly does that scrum have to do with the sport of hockey? Like it was a totally, like, I get it. Physical game, tempers flare. At the end of the day, though, it was a totally unnecessary incident that we are very fortunate to have not had a more severe outcome to.
Yeah. That's interesting when you talk about taking away the scrum. That's something I really haven't thought about.
I don't know if you necessarily could, and I don't know if I necessarily support the idea of it because it's so ingrained in the sport. The idea of these, especially in the playoffs, these post-scrum whistles, the idea of protecting the goalies, like certainly old school hockey fans, veteran hockey players would be like, well, you take away the scrums, it's open season on the goalie. Like, I'm not necessarily saying that. But the idea of Brendan Gallagher going for a takedown and ended up getting dumped on his head, we're just very fortunate that I mean, again, call me a pansy if you want, but I'm sorry. I could see the headlines on freaking CNN, NHL hockey player in coma. Like, that could have happened from the Gallagher incident with the way he landed, the way his neck contorted. Like, my God.
Yeah. And this was, to me, I guess, I don't know. It's hard for me to have an opinion on this when it's so clear that the NHL isn't going to admit the stove is hot until someone burns their hand.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's their stance on this.
It was the same thing like that we talked about last week, right? With the idea of neck protectors being mandatory.
Yeah.
Like, nothing's going to be implemented in a serious way until something serious happens. And even then, we've had the Malarchuks, we've had the Zedniks, and now it's like, well, it's optional if you want to wear it, but you don't have to. So it's like, literally, it's going to take a death on the ice for certain changes to happen. Like, if there is a fight and somebody falls and ends up dying, then fighting will be banned. But until then, it's not going to happen. It'll still be frowned upon. Same thing with like the cross checks. Like, it's probably going to take somebody getting paralyzed from a cross check to the lower back before we actually see them be like, yeah, hey, you know, the standard of cross checking in our league is pretty fucked, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I agree.
Now, unless you have another point here, we can move on to the other officiating talking point and physical talking point in regards to this game.
Yeah, this other one was weird. That's my word for it. Especially when you look at the replay in full speed or slow speed, because you can kind of look at this in, to me, the two arguments people have over this Kucherov slash both make sense to me. Like, I understand how people arrive at the two conclusions.
So, Kucherov slashed last night by Shea Weber. Weber was fined $5,000. Deej, those two arguments, I presume, meaning that's the one. And also, I mean, there's a lot of calls saying it was a dive and that they're just protecting a star player.
Well, to quote Jim Boomer Gordon on the Shea Weber $5,000 fine, Jim Boomer Gordon, obviously the host of Sirius XM NHL radio in the afternoons, he said about this $5,000 fine, it's Stanley Cup Finals Game 1. Why don't you just write him a check for 15? So that way the next two are already taken care of. So it's one of those things where I think, I don't know. I don't think it was a dive. Kucherov hasn't ever shown to be a divey player. I mean, of course, there was that weird slash from, or the quote unquote slash from Declare in the Panthers series where he dove. I think what's happening with Kucherov is he is playing significantly more hurt than anybody thinks. And that's just me not wanting to think of Kucherov as a diver. I think that's the answer here.
In a way, though, here's the thing. If he is a diver, I do not blame him. And I will tell you why. Connor McDavid has not had a penalty drawn in 2 postseasons now.
Well, that's because he knows people will call him Connor McDiveid.
Well, we have an episode title. Beautiful. But it's a similar thing to in why there's a diving issue in soccer or football is because there can technically be a penalty without someone ending up on the floor. But oftentimes in soccer, unless the guy ends up on the floor, nothing's going to be called. It's a rarity, which is why soccer players had the reputation for diving and trying to draw calls. Hockey is incredibly similar. It just is. Corey Perry gets slashed in the fucking face. Deej, I'm sure you saw the picture of the scar he was sporting afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
Corey Perry didn't make a big deal of it, and the refs missed it. Should they have? Of course not. But if Corey Perry went the extra mile and made a bigger deal of that slash, that would have been called. So for Nikita Kucherov, if you're sick and tired of getting cross-checked in the back, like we had seen in the previous series, if you're sick and tired as a superstar player who knows that the standard of officiating in the league is resulting in more parity and allowing lesser skilled players to do what they want to try and hang in there with you, then you need to try to find the equalizer. So yes, I am arguing that a star player like Nikita Kucherov should dive. Why not? The standard of officiating is so poor. We've all had this conversation all season long. We had it when Connor McDavid, the number came out. He hasn't drawn any penalties. Connor McDiveid or not, if he starts flopping, Deej, he gets penalty calls. Maybe the Oilers aren't swept. Maybe the Oilers don't lose in the first round at all. I do not blame at all a star player like Nikita Kucherov for diving if in fact he dove. It is the smart thing to do, and it's another aspect of what the NHL has allowed and encouraged by the way they have conducted themselves in terms of what they call the officiating on ice, the Department of Player Safety. This is bound to happen, that a star player is going to dive to try and draw these calls. Period.
Yeah. I mean, even playing beer league, like I've had this thought, right? So like, I mean, for whatever reason, they don't call slashing in beer league. Like this is people forums across hockey. It's like the dumbest thing ever. And for whatever reason, like the second you get past the guy, they just go straight for your wrist with the stick. It's like, it's ridiculous. And I've had this thought to myself so many times where it's just like, do I just drop my glove and yell just so somebody goes to the box and they know it's not okay to break someone's wrist over hockey? Like, it's a thought you have where you're not necessarily like, I think when we use the word diving, it becomes like this loaded word because it's immediately compared to the egregious soccer penalties that you see like all over Twitter and like in GIFs where like obviously nothing happened. But I think more
if you have, sorry to cut you off. In hockey, though, if you have the reputation of a diver, someone's essentially calling you a pussy. And in this idea of this overly macho, manly sport of hockey, you don't want to be labeled a pussy. Oh, no. Like, oh, no, what? You mean you can't handle the 15 illegal cross-checks to your fucking kidneys that the refs refuse to call? Don't be a pussy. Don't dive. Like, that's essentially what people are saying.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like the standard of officiating. It's like, I guess to sum up your point in a way that, like, I guess is like a nice tidy bow on it, at least for the way I like think about things, is it's like, in this case, it almost makes sense to dive because the standard of officiating is so low that you need to draw attention to the fact that somebody is not making hockey plays, but is trying to hurt you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly it.
And diving's not okay, but like, what else is your defense? Because I think you have a right as a hockey player, no matter what level you are playing at, to not be physically injured by something that is not an accident or a hockey play.
Like I said, this is what that standard of officiating has led to. The cross-checking problem that we've only seen exacerbated all season long. This is what happens. You are going to have players then feeling the need to take some action, to, take matters into their own hands to stop themselves from getting physically abused, essentially. Because, hey, guess what? There's a rule book, but as we've all said all postseason long, the refs aren't using it. They're not paying attention to it. So why then is it a bad idea to flop? I don't get it. Because of the sanctimony of the sport? Like, no. We've all had that conversation all postseason long, all season long, how bad the refs are. Well, what's your alternative as a player then to do this? And then I'm sorry, you can't have it both ways. Because that's not reality. You can't have it say the refs need to be better, also players don't need to dive. Yes, in a perfect world, that would be the case. We don't live in a perfect world, and this is far from a perfect sports league.
Yeah. And that said, I mean, like, I have gone a while with a very injured shoulder before I actually went and saw a doctor about it and got help. And there would just be moments where, like, I moved it wrong and I would think it would be okay for a second, and then the pain would all hit like a second and a half later, which is also a possibility of what happened with Kucherov here. I think it's not like we're entirely saying this was a dive too. I mean, it's entirely possible that he took this slash right to the soft part, and then, like, it takes a second for whatever the hell went wrong to go wrong. So I don't know.
And on top of that, like, yeah, I get it. Like, if you're a fan of the other team, or if you're rooting against Tampa and you see a play like that, you're going to think, oh, what a fucking diver. Oh, these guys are over the cap. It's not enough to be over the cap. You got to sit here and do this. But it's like, I'd be saying the same exact thing if this was Nick Suzuki. if this was Matt Barzal, if this was Patrice Bergeron. Like, it's the same thing. Like, eventually, yeah, players are going to try to find a way to prevent the opposition from taking liberties. It's up to the officials to do their job. This is just another aspect of it. Now, on top of that, and speaking to Nikita Kucherov here, he has become just the third player in NHL history to have scored 30-plus points in consecutive postseasons, joining Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux. Of course, we pointed out Brayden Point and his consecutive goal streak earlier as well, matching what had only been done, or at least the goals in consecutive postseasons, I believe it was, matching only what had been done by Gretzky and Lemieux, in case, the idea of this Tampa team somehow not being as good as they are is somehow out there. It's crazy. Kucherov is unbelievable when fully healthy. So, DJ, I do have the question, though, because we had talked about this before. Conn Smythe favorites. We talked about it in the last episode. Apparently, right now, according to NHL.com's writers, Carey Price is the runaway winner of the Conn Smythe, 37 points to Brayden Point, 17. Where is Nikita Kucherov in this voting? He is the leading scorer of this postseason and has my vote. Like I said, if Tampa wins the Cup, Kucherov wins the Conn Smythe. If Montreal wins it, Carey Price obviously does. Where the hell is Nikita Kucherov? How is he not top two minimum? Like, I love what Brayden Point's been doing, but I mean, you look at the numbers right now, and here, I'll bring them up in the aftermath of game one. I get it. Brayden Point's been phenomenal. He has 23 points, 14 goals in 19 games. Nikita Kucherov has 30 points in 19 games, 23 assists. But, goddamn, man. Are we valuing goals that much more?
Well, here, let me bring up a stat for you. And this is nuts to me. And this is why I think it's ridiculous that Kucherov isn't even in the conversation here. Among active NHL players, right? Sidney Crosby, 191 points. He's number one. Evgeny Malkin's number 2, 174. Ovechkin, 3. Joe Thornton, 4. Nikita Kucherov is 5. And his career started 8 years after Sidney Crosby. If you were to prorate Kucherov's playoff points for Sidney Crosby's career, he would have around 250 to Sidney Crosby's 191. That is crazy.
Yeah.
And I don't see. I mean, Brayden Point, don't get me wrong, is still very good. He's 16th among active players with 73, and he's only been in the league for 4 years.
That's insane. My God.
He has more playoff points than Steven Stamkos. Crazy. I get that Brayden Point has had the more clutch moments. I just don't know how you cannot give the Conn Smythe to Kucherov, especially when you look historically at how Brayden Point as a hockey player doesn't entirely disappear, but he runs at about 40% of efficiency when Nikita Kucherov is not there. That said, he does have 14 goals in the playoffs. The second highest is Steven Stamkos with 8. So Brayden Point is obviously getting it done as a goal scorer. Goals do win games, but I do think he is just finishing what Kucherov is starting.
That said, you have Point, you have Kucherov, you have Vasilevsky, all with a legitimate argument for if the series were to end today, who wins the Conn Smythe for Tampa? I can tell you're looking at something.
No, I really want to give it to Kucherov, but when I was driving around today, I was just like, how do you not give it to Vasilevsky?
It's true. I mean, if they had Vasilevsky over Kucherov, I'd get it. Like the battle of the goaltenders who have both been absolutely phenomenal.
I mean, at 26 years old,
Brayden Point would be my third choice on Tampa behind Kuch and Vasi.
I think that's fair. I had this thought today where at 26 years old, it is entirely possible that this season ends with Vasi having will this be his second Vezina this year?
Yes.
Does he have one already? 2 Vezinas,
so.
2 Cups, and a Conn Smythe by 26 in a league where goalies typically don't even play their first season until 26, 27. I think, I mean, if the controversial hot take, if Tampa wins this year, Vasi's officially the best goalie in the lockout era, in the post-lockout era.
Don't necessarily disagree. He'll have the stats and the hardware to show for it. And I mean, again, as crazy as it feels, I've said this before, he has been Tampa's starter for 5 seasons now. His time moves fast, everybody. So aside from that, then, a couple other quick talking points, Deej, that we have from around the NHL and the hockey world.
Well, there's one I want to bring up first. There is a general hockey talk thing I want to bring up because this was extremely upsetting and it's going heavily underreported. So the NHL last year, when canceling the All-Star game in Sunrise, they promised the Florida Panthers the 2022 All-Star game. The one they just announced is going to be in Vegas. Tickets were sold to me with tickets for the All-Star game. So Panthers fans are ticked. They pulled the carpet out from under us. And I guess the president of the Panthers, Matt Caldwell, reached out to the league today because he was like, what? Like, you told us it was coming here. And I guess the reasoning is they want to wait an extra year because they think it is so, this is the bullshit the league gave the Panthers. They think it is so important, or maybe the bullshit the Panthers are giving to the fans. They think it is so important for the Panthers to have this All-Star game that they don't want to give them one that could be canceled by the Olympics.
Yeah, I'm not buying that. I'm not buying that because if I'm not mistaken, the 2020 NHL draft was supposed to be in Montreal. And now I saw from Elliot Friedman I think it was yesterday, that they're going to get the 2022 draft. Now, this year's draft, if I'm not mistaken, is virtual again. So Montreal was supposed to get last year's draft. If I'm not mistaken, like I said, yes, I can confirm. Last year, Montreal was supposed to get their draft. They didn't get it, and they're not getting it this year, but they're going to get it in 2022. So why would you not do the same thing for the Florida Panthers? Because the idea of, we already know that they've put out 2 schedules. So yeah, why would it go to Vegas? Yeah, I agree. I think the Cats are getting shafted there because that doesn't line up with the other moves that they're making for the likes of the draft. Now, yes, the draft can't be canceled by the Olympics, but the thought of, okay, well, if you do end up going to the Olympics, just say, hey, 2023 All-Star game. We'll do that. Like, what? Just say it's going to be in Florida until, hey, sorry, we made a deal to go to the Olympics. It's not. I agree. That's incredibly scummy.
So the Panthers weren't the only team that was shafted.
Okay.
So the Carolina Hurricanes were also shafted by the league, where they had an outdoor game and an agreement to host one of the outdoor games next year, and it was canceled. And the reason that the league gave the Hurricanes, or at least the Hurricanes have said they came to a mutual agreement with the league that it was in the best idea to postpone it to, quote unquote, ensure a safe environment. In an arena that was allowing 75% capacity a month ago. So, I mean, for the Panthers, I'm not all that upset because we are in the process of building a 3-rink ice surface that will function as our brand new practice facility. Our last practice facility was built in 1997, and it's kind of far from anything major. And now they're building a downtown 3-rink practice facility in Fort Lauderdale.
Things you don't hear
having that
as a non-Panthers fan.
Yeah, right. And they signed a 50-year lease for the land. So
Jesus.
Sorry, QC. 50-year lease. gonna be a long flight to the games. So anyway, like having that for the All-Star game though, I think could work in our advantage. That said, I mean, don't get me wrong, I would have bought season tickets anyway because it's the Panthers. But like I was like, yeah, they were like, yeah, we'll give you tickets to the All-Star game and your regular seats. It'll be awesome. So they're selling us lies.
It is pretty shitty. I don't agree with that decision whatsoever. I mean, I do
and
agree
then to give
with
it to Vegas,
right?
Of all people,
like you gave it to Vegas, another, the newest team outside of Seattle. Like if you gave it to like a historic market that like, okay, we're going to be fine here, but you can't tell me the same thing, the same thought process doesn't apply to Vegas like it would to Florida in terms of, well, this is very important that it's successful. So yeah, I don't like that. I'm not buying that at all. We'll move on. Unless Deej wants to vent. And
no, it's okay.
So.
I'll record a rant video later. Check it out on my new channel at Deej Rants
USA.
It's a multinational rant channel, especially if Ukraine loses. Anyway.
Wayne Simmons has been re-signed by the Toronto Maple Leafs. 2-year deal, $900K per cap hit. I'm okay with it. Wayne Simmons is a fourth line, grind him up defensive option, sure. Obviously, Wayne Simmons, and everyone knows it, isn't the same top six power forward threat that he used to be. So a good deal. I think especially if his health can maintain. That's the big question, right? Because obviously he missed time this year due to injury as well. That's the big question surrounding one Wayne Simmons. Deej, any thoughts on that?
I think it's interesting that Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is apparently as good as 5 2/3 Wayne Simmons is.
Wayne Simmons.
If we're going to use that metric. No, I think that's a good deal. Metric. I think it was a great. The Wayne Simonsies. There's got to be a weird pluralization there that I'm missing. That would be way funnier. But yeah, I think that's, and I think that comparison and the impact Wayne Simmons had on the Toronto Maple Leafs goes to show you how good of a deal this is for the Leafs.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's one of those deals too. Like, okay, Simmons is back for dirt cheap. Spets is back for dirt cheap. Those are good moves for them. Still intrigued to see if Toronto makes like a crazy move before heading into next season. Another random one. We're just going to go rapid fire here through these dates to finish up the show. Gary Bettman has said that helmet sponsors are going to continue. No jersey ads for at least next season. Of course, we talked about that. Jersey ads, I don't care. I don't care about jersey ads. I don't care about helmet ads. Again, all the bitching and moaning about helmet ads, again, it died out within a month. And I got to be honest, maybe it's just because I'm a fan of soccer. I don't really care if the Bruins end up with the Dunkin' Donuts logo on their jersey. I don't really care if the Dunkin' Donuts logo is bigger than the Boston Bruins crest. It doesn't matter to me. Call me an ass, but it doesn't really make that much of a difference to me.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess they're probably just waiting until they can destroy the jersey I've been putting money aside to purchase at the ESPN Disney Muscle Milk Time Warner All-Star Game in Sunrise.
As well. We'll move on to the next one. There's no way we can top that. A lot of rumors surrounding Seth Jones going to a couple of different teams, but the one name that keeps popping up, the Philadelphia Flyers. So the Flyers fans, I say, enjoy your much more expensive new Andrew McDonald, because I think it's not gonna go well. I just don't see it going well for them at all.
I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that Seth Jones isn't good. Like, don't get me wrong, Seth Jones's metrics aren't good. He struggles to adapt to playing with players that aren't Werenski, but I still think at his core, Seth Jones is a good hockey player, right? So really, my question when I look at this rumor is, and I think this goes, this is like weirdly ignored, I feel like, whenever they talk about this. Seth Jones still under contract for one more year. He just doesn't want to resign 1 year from now. I think him and Ivan Provorov. No,
Easy with
he's
that.
still under contract for one more year. So that's why why it's always a trade. And so I think that it's so weird, right? Because it's not like he's just going to go sign somewhere. So something needs to be traded for him. And I think him and Provorov would make a fantastic defensive pairing. I think Provorov very much doesn't play exactly the same game as Werenski, but I feel like he can elevate Seth Jones's game to that same level. But what the hell do the Flyers give up for Seth Jones? Like, what do they have? You know?
Yeah, I mean, here I'll let's go ahead and look up a little bit about the Philadelphia Flyers and what they could potentially.
You want the rights to Brian Elliott?
So the Flyers do have all of their draft picks this year. Technically, they don't have their fifth, but they have Vegas's. So they do have all of their draft picks. I mean, in terms of. Like, they have $13 million in cap space, and they don't have anybody major to re-sign outside of Travis Sanheim, but you could probably fit Sanheim and Jones under the same deal. They do have Carter Hart to re-sign, but obviously he cost himself a decent amount of money.
Oh, they're going to get him for a song and a dance after this season.
Oh man. I mean, in terms of the prospect pool, okay, so they have picks. Prospect wise, I mean, if you wanted to give up roster players, I mean, you could throw names out there if you want. But like Zayd Wisdom was a decent early to mid round pick. Elite Prospects is going slow. I apologize. It is a 4th round pick. Tyson Forster was their 1st round pick this past season. He played 17 games in the AHL with 24 points, which is actually pretty damn good for an 18, 19-year-old. German Rubtsov's over in the KHL at this point. Jay O'Brien is a name that sticks out to me, just again from the whole NHL roster editing stuff, where 1st round pick of the Flyers in 2018. Just played his 1st season in the NCAA with Boston University, 16 points in 16 games. So they do have prospects that they could look to give up. Bobby Brink comes to mind, a younger, more NHL-ready guy like Wade Allison comes to mind. Defensively, Wyatt Wiley, probably don't want to give up Cam York, but they have prospects in pretty much all departments that they could look to make this move. It's just, what exactly would Columbus be looking for here?
Yeah. And I've got to imagine the Seth Jones market is so hot. Like, you get a name brand right shot defenseman that, although he's had some down years, has had 2 exceptional years if you look at his stats. And there's just enough of a need in a defensive market that the Flyers would have to make a hell of an offer. And then when you get into those metrics that we talked about, is he going to be worth the price tag he ends up commanding? Because I'm not going to say that Seth Jones in Philadelphia isn't going to be a fit, but I think his price tag is going to be extremely inflated.
Yes.
Especially once Dougie Hamilton signs for $13 million in Toronto.
Right. Like, unless you wait it out. I agree with you. So unless you wait it out, and then, you might be too late to the party. Hamilton's off the board. What if Seth Jones gets traded elsewhere? Then what do you do? Right. So
yeah,
it's a real tough call at that stage to figure out the next step for your team. You don't want to be the ones to miss out on the big fish, which often leads to your team overspending. We'll talk about somebody else that is apparently on the move. And we've heard these rumors for a while.
Yeah.
Frank Saravalli confirming Capitals tired of Evgeny Kuznetsov antics. The time is right for a change. Now, obviously, Deej, if you sit here and talk about what team could use another middle 6 center or, top 6 center in Kuznetsov, that's most teams in the NHL would probably be in the market for someone like an Evgeny Kuznetsov, still a very solid, capable player. But there's the issue of him being 29 years old with a $7.8 million cap hit for 4 more years. And apparently there's personality/antics issues. Who takes the risk? I mean, I said in the last episode that, hey, Jack Eichel, have fun in Vegas, but people joke about Kuznetsov because of the whole did he not powdery substance while in Vegas. But I mean, the Vegas Golden Knights.
I think everybody knows the answer to that.
With Evgeny Kuznetsov, William Karlsson, and Chandler Stevenson up the middle, it's pretty damn good too.
So first, let me get out of the way something I need to address in this situation, which is that I love the word antics in this situation because it antics usually refers to innocent mischief that's getting on people's nerves, and they're like,
Bart
so like
Simpson
you're picturing
was
him
up to
like
antics.
Yeah, like Bart Simpson was up to antics. So it's like, what did he do? It's like, oh, he's like he bleached Ovi's lucky jersey. Like it's like that's what you think of, or it's just like, or like he tied somebody's laces together. And it's like, what did he actually do? It's like mountains of cocaine, and then he got COVID 3 times and exposed all of his teammates to it. So we're going to use the word antics. Whether or not that's like exactly what happened, obviously, like something happened where he just continually tested positive this last season, which is like, I mean, they were talking about like the medical chances of that. I don't know. Like it's so weird because up until this last year, he was almost a point per game player. So you've got to imagine that on top of like these, like the handful of 2 or 3 incidents, like he's got to be some sort of like a locker room problem somehow on a team that, let's be honest, parties harder than any other team in the league. Everybody's seen documented evidence of it. We've all seen Ovechkin swimming in a public fountain. Like, and so like at what point does something happen where you're like, nope, his antics aren't okay. We're the Washington Capitals and we're serious now. So I'm thinking something very bad must have happened.
The Caps.
That's the only thing that makes sense, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're as well, too. They're without their first rounder this year, their second rounder next year, and their third rounder this year. So they have half of their picks over the next 2 years in the first 3 rounds. Granted, they have Arizona's third rounder. I mean, again, how do you move a near $8 million player, center or not, with these alleged antics? I mean, someone will bite, but the idea of what team can even take on a player like this? I mean, it is the majority of the league. Like, you pretty much only rule out, I mean, at face value, Tampa, Pittsburgh, the Islanders, Golden Knights, Hawks, and the Caps themselves are the only teams with less than $10 million projected in salary cap space upcoming. So you look at the teams at the bottom. Like, would a Detroit take a shot on them? New Jersey, Buffalo. The Arizona Coyotes have a ton of money. The Bruins actually have the 6th highest amount of money freed up right now, obviously because Rask and Krejci, Taylor Hall as well, without contract. There are teams that he could fit with, but it's just a matter of, it's just a matter of where the hell does he land? So
yeah, and I don't know. I think I brought this up earlier at this point when they first mentioned that Kuznetsov might be on the move. Is when you have a player like that is under normal circumstances extremely valuable, why do you just tank his value by bringing up these issues? Because, okay, so obviously we can come to the conclusion that this guy's a problem in the locker room, right? So what team is going to want to take that on? Because if you think about it and you're like, oh, okay, this guy is a problem in the locker room. It's like, what do we do? Well, let's pair him with the best Russian player of all time and maybe he makes his game serious. Oh, wait, he's already there. It's like, you can't fix him. This is how I look at it.
If there's one thing, though, that an NHL GM loves, it's the idea of I can fix that player and I'm going to look like a genius because of it. All sports GMs love that concept, hockey GMs especially. So if he's available, someone will bite, I'm sure.
I don't think that's healthy. My friend does that with girlfriends. He's in debt. You can't try and fix everybody.
Fair enough. Speaking of trying to fix a horrible situation, Don Granato, who was the temporary coach, for lack of a better term, interim coach of the Buffalo Sabres, has been announced as their full-time head coach. We'll see what happens, but to be honest, they did play better the back half of the season once Ralph Kruger was fired. Yeah,
I think I think when I look at this, it's a very much an if it ain't broke, don't fix it situation where I think like, he was a very serviceable coach, and in a team with so many question marks, he want as much consistency as possible. And he got this one of the worst hockey teams ever assembled to come together and start winning games. And I can't believe I'm going to make this joke for like the 9th time in a very Gordon Bombay-esque manner.
Fair enough. As well, in terms of coaching, apparently the Arizona Coyotes are looking at Hockey Canada coach, and it's a very French name, so I apologize if I botch it, but Andre Tourigny.
Andre T.
Andre T. Which, I mean, hey, for the Coyotes, it's pretty shocking. I mean, it's not one of the trusted hockey men, right? And I mean, this is a guy, he's 47. He has coached a gold medal world junior team. He has a world championship, I believe, this year as well. Like, he is a fairly accredited hockey man, though, for the most part. He's been with the Ottawa 67s as head coach and vice president of hockey ops since 2017, 2018. He was formerly an assistant coach with the Colorado Avalanche and the Ottawa Senators. So a lot of experience in the queue, some NHL experience as an assistant coach, someone who's never really gotten a shot yet. I don't hate the move. I honestly don't hate the move. I think it's interesting that, you know, you have a team where you look at Bill Armstrong as the GM of that team and you think he's just going to go with trusted hockey man, and for him to look in a different direction is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that, and then we kind of brought this up last episode, right? Like, the well of NHL coaches is officially dry.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you kind of got to look elsewhere, and I'm just glad that somebody's finally getting a shot out of what, I mean, the old boys club thing, they talked about it going away, but it's very much resurfaced, and it, I don't know, somebody from the outside is getting a shot, and I think that's good for the sport.
There you go. I'll notice too here, before we get to our final talking point, the NWHL draft has started while Deej and I have been recording this. Just wanted to shout out Taylor Girard, the #1 overall pick, going to the Connecticut Whale. For those who don't know, the NWHL, they broadcast their games in the draft on Twitch. They're at NWHL. So follow the NWHL. I wish I was home, so I had my Boston Pride jersey, but I don't. But yeah, follow the NWHL. Support women's hockey, goddammit. Deej, our final talking point here. Today is the 5-year anniversary of one of the craziest days in the history of hockey, as at 3:34 p.m., the Edmonton Oilers traded Taylor Hall to the New Jersey Devils for Adam Larson. 20 minutes later, Montreal and Nashville swapped PK Subban and Shea Weber, and then 3 minutes later, Steven Stamkos chose to stay in Tampa. Do you remember this day at all? And I guess your thoughts on each of the events at the time and what they've turned into.
I remember this day. And looking back on it, it's even crazier than it was at the time, because I feel like this particular day, for me, I was like, oh, the NHL is going to be crazy now. Like, just like, I was like, in the future, there's going to be trades like this. And there really haven't been any. And I mean, Hall for Larson, I think there's not a person in this world outside of Chiarelli and his family that will tell you is not one of the worst trades of all time.
At the very least, there were no winners.
He could have traded his sandwich for a rock and people would have been like, that was a better choice. And so I don't know. It's difficult for me to look at this trade, especially it was just so bad, especially knowing that Larson never lived up to the hype that was already apparent, that already was dwindling. And somehow Chiarelli's hype was significantly higher than any other human being on the planet's over Larson. Like, there's no doubt that he was projected to be a very good defenseman, but
I mean, he's solid in sheltered minutes. Looks to be the stats from this past season. That this was one of his better seasons in a while, but you know, in terms of like the quality of competition, not to an extreme level. So there is still time for this trade to be won by the Oilers. Adam Larson's still there, where of course Taylor Hall has been here, there, and everywhere since moving on, of course, from the New Jersey Devils. I don't declare a winner if, you know, like I don't say the Devils won this because Taylor Hall won a Hart. Certainly not. But for the Oilers here, I mean, hey, if they bring back Adam Larson, at least, who is on an expiring deal, the potential is still there, I suppose.
Yeah. So then I look at this next trade, and this next trade is weird because initially this trade was a huge L for Montreal. And then over the next year or two, it became an even bigger L for Montreal. As Nashville just continued to steamroll and look awesome. And PK Subban appeared to be a huge part of their core. And then I have no idea what happened, but PK Subban went to the Devils and stopped being good at hockey, and Shea Weber continued to be Shea Weber, just a slightly aged version of himself that was on curve with what you would expect for his age. So this trade, I'm going to say, is 50-50. I'm going to say this was an even trade in retrospect, even though it was not at the time.
Both players have made a Stanley Cup final with the team that they got dealt to. I don't think at any point I'll declare Montreal having taken an L, but they could still certainly win it. If they win a Stanley Cup this season, they win the Subban-Weber trade. I don't think you can say, like, oh, well, Montreal technically still has the same player, and they've also done the same thing, so they win. No. It's an even trade right now, but the potential's there for Montreal.
Here's how I would say, here's how I look at this trade. I don't think Montreal lost anything in this trade. Like, I think, like, things would have still kind of played out the same way they had with Shea Weber. However, Nashville won something in this trade.
Nashville can't lose, but Montreal can still win it. Does that make sense?
I feel like PK Subban's personality and marketability, though, led to Nashville having a player that they could put front and center in front of the fans, in front of a lot of new hockey fans, as they made that cup run up against the Penguins. And I think in a way, this trade benefited Nashville on an off-ice level. And I don't think that necessarily means Montreal lost the trade. I don't think that Montreal would have benefited from having PK Subban on the team in the same situation. If that makes sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
You see, that I agree with, right? Because I've always had that take and people have ripped me for it. I still say, I think I said it on the last show, I still think the Pacioretty, the Webers, the Subbans, excuse me, like the core that Montreal had before, if you put the right pieces together along with Carey Price playing to this level, I think Montreal could have won without the teardown and rebuild that they've done since. But I agree, given how it's played out, granted, you don't know the circumstances if they'd be the same. But from a modern perspective, yeah, they're a hell of a lot better off with Shea Weber than PK Subban. Who knows what Subban's health would be like had he stayed in Montreal and not gone to Nashville and then New Jersey. But, you know, that's a never know situation. But, you know, would Nashville, again, it's a complete toss-up. Would Nashville have won the Stanley Cup with Shea Weber still there instead of PK Subban? Who's to say?
Yeah. It's hard to say.
And then the last option there, the last moment was Steven Stamkos choosing to stay in Tampa instead of going to the likes of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Pretty good decision.
Yeah. I mean, he probably took realistically, based on that offseason and how in demand he was, he probably took a $4 million discount. I mean, he was ready. He was about to get paid.
Yeah. He would have gotten the John Tavares deal.
Yeah, easily. And instead, he saw that it was crazy outside, so he stayed home. Like, that's how I kind of like to look at this. Is like Steven was still thinking about it and then saw these two trades and was like, I'm not leaving the house today. So, I don't know. I think Stamkos 100% made the right decision. And I think, I mean, this is when you get into one of the more tired arguments in hockey, but 8.5 in a zero income tax state is like the same as making 19 million in Montreal or whatever, you know? And I think that I don't necessarily think he took the discount that I made it seem like he did a second ago. And I think he made the right decision because him and Hedman said that we'll both take a discount. We'll be part of the score. We'll win a cup. And they did.
So with that, I mean, hey, they might just win another one. All things considered, they're up 1-0. Deej, your prediction as we close this show for how Game 2 is going to go in Tampa. Although actually just announced the Hart Trophy is going to be awarded, I believe, tomorrow night as well. Yeah, well, no, Tuesday. I think it's going to be announced. It's going to be announced tonight. Going to be announced tonight. McKinnon, Matthews, McDavid. McDavid wins, right? No talking point there. And yeah, how do you see Game 2 going on Wednesday?
I just don't see Montreal making this. Philip Deneau can only do so much to slow down this Tampa team, and for Tampa to lose a game, they will have to play a bad game. I don't think Montreal as a team is capable of coming together and playing at a higher level than Tampa's average. And I think Tampa will have to have a bad game while Montreal plays at an extremely high level to win a game. So stats are, based on all the numbers I've run, Ukraine wins the UFA.
I knew it.
They're taking it home. I don't care if they're still a developing country. That's technically an advantage when it comes to the sport of soccer. So Ukraine, the blue, the yellow, those are the only two colors. They make green. It's the same color as the pitch. They're taking it home, and that pitch is going to be well trimmed, and you can keep your pitch well trimmed.
Keep going.
With Manscaped. That's right. You can use code Tougie. That's right. TOUGIE for 20% off at manscaped.com.
If you're going to be partying,
you need.
If you're going to be partying in the streets of Kiev, celebrating Ukraine winning Euro 2020 in 2021, you want to make sure you're looking your best with Manscaped.
If you're going to wear those short Umbros out onto the pitch, see, I watched Ted Lasso. I know some of these words. You're going to want to use Manscaped. You're going to want to use code Tougie for 20% off. Manscaped, your balls will thank you. Will they bring it home? Yes, Ukraine will.
See you later on this week, everybody. Thank you for listening. Also, breaking news, somewhat breaking news. The ECHL's Maine Mariners officially switching their affiliation from the Philadelphia Flyers to the Boston Bruins, baby. It's coming home, Deej. It came home. The Mariners back where they belong with the Boston goddamn Bruins. I can't wait to see Zach Senyshyn when he gets demoted to the E live with my own eyes.
It just makes sense logistically. I know people are like, is it the Kraken? And be like, that's like a 36-hour bus ride. Like, let's not do that.
I have taken that flight. No fucking thank you.
All right. You sitting in the plane, you lean forward a little, try and get there sooner. It doesn't work. Anyway, have a great week, everybody. We'll see you on Friday.